Thanks for joining me for a few moments. I just wanted to share with you some really interesting information and an interesting view that the Masters shared with us and a dear one yesterday about relationships and how we are positioning ourselves in relationships and how we have an opportunity to really change our view of them. Many of us at the moment are finding ourselves coming very, very close to the things that we feel are in opposition to us. And we are experiencing what it is to be in relationships that are driven by chemistry and driven by a force of attraction. Sometimes that force of attraction brings us together, but then there is a real sense of electricity, friction, and sometimes a sense that perhaps it's getting a little bit too heated for us. So one of the things we're finding in the last year or so, especially since we've gone more into our own sense of selves through what's happening with the world and this experience of quarantine and isolation, is we're actually finding that for many of us who are in relationships, whether it be with children or partners or family or even very close friendships, what we're finding is that because of this sense of compression at the moment, we're coming and we're facing each other so closely right now. And there's a way that we could view this in that, well, it's good because that which we didn't want to see is coming to the surface, or that which we need to resolve is really in our faces. And it's very difficult at this time to ignore the things that we've put aside for another time or the things that we've compromised with. So the way that the Masters described this to us, for me, was so profound because visually it was so clear. And what they showed is that the way in which we've learned how to be in relationships with duality is coming in and facing each other and creating something in that space between. And in this way, it's that law of opposites attract, or that law of there's something in this that I can learn from. This person's going to teach me something, I can teach them something. And so there's a counteracting force that happens there. Now, we know that with a lot of our relationships that have had karmic residue, relationships that are designed to bring out more of ourselves, it is often that sense of friction that happens when two different elements come together that has an opportunity to create something new. That's the alchemy, but also generates a lot of heat and electricity. Now, for many of us right now, that's exactly where we are in relationships. And I know that a lot of my friends and loved ones and families, and probably in your lives as well, are looking at the people very close in their relationships and wondering if they should still be there, wondering if there's anything we can do to change this view. And this is what happens when compression is our experience. It brings us so close to each other. You're looking each other in the eye and you're wondering, what do I do with this? I've either got to change myself or that person has to change. And that's really where we are. So the way that the Masters have described it is so powerful in that it's a very, very subtle shift. That means it doesn't necessarily have to be a cataclysmic separation. There doesn't necessarily have to be anybody compromising. There isn't necessarily a problem to be solved here. But there is a very beautiful invitation to reverse the polarity that you're experiencing in that moment. And the way that they're describing it to us is that when two people come together in a relationship and they're brought together like this, that attraction in the moment is what pulls them into that space. And they call this the two halves to the seed. And so you're sitting there in this space like this and you're looking at each other. That seed eventually must produce form because that's the nature of all life. And how they're describing the field of our relationships at this time is a piece of fruit that's being formed. And so the invitation is to stop looking at each other so closely. Stop feeling as if perhaps you might drown in the other person or that they're a problem and something needs to be resolved. But very, very gently, just turn away from each other. Now, that doesn't mean you're leaving each other's space. That doesn't mean that you're disregarding the other person. What it means is that there's a reversal in where your focus is. And when that reversal happens, suddenly you're both looking at a completely different view. You're no longer looking at each other as the barrier or the pathway to your world. You're no longer looking at that other person in front of you as something that needs to be dealt with before you can experience life. You're now having a much grander view because you've turned around and you've got your backs to each other. Two halves of that seed opening up and now the fruit being formed. Now, when we use the word fruit, let's think about the shape of a toroidal field with you and your partner in the middle, or you and your child, or you and your loved one, or you and your friend, or you and your parent, with your backs to each other. Suddenly there's a grand view. Suddenly life opens up. You've got one half of the view and they've got the other half of the view. So suddenly there's an entire 360-degree view of reality. This is the opening of consciousness. And in many ways, this is the potential that all relationships have had. You come together in this way, and then you reverse, and this toroidal field for life and potentiality is opened. Now, when you begin to have that view, when both of you are willing to still stay there in the center, but with your backs against each other, rather than looking at each other, suddenly life opens up. Suddenly that pressure is lifted. Suddenly there's new possibilities and pathways. It doesn't mean that you're moving away from each other. It means that life's opening up because you're no longer regarding each other as the first point of call in your reality. Now, if you can imagine what that feels like, the intensity of looking someone in the eye during a challenging time or a time of friction, and then actually reversing that and feeling your back against them, it can suddenly feel very supportive. It can suddenly feel very, very reassuring. And there's a great sense of feeling tall and vertical in it. That sense of vertical nature is that realignment again with your true source, your true creative consciousness. There's less of this push-pull going on, and all of a sudden there's alignment that's happening and the view begins to open. It's an incredible opportunity that we have right now to actually begin to create a new reality for ourselves. This is not about removing people from your lives. This is not about discarding them. It's not about even walking away from a problem. It's just reversing your view so that you begin to really potentialize the space around you. Now, if you were to actually play with this and have a physical experience of this, I'm going to try this with my son today, for example. When we're looking at each other and we're locked in stubbornness and we're locked in I'm right or you're right, or this is what I want to do and you're being resistant with me, to suddenly turn around and feel our backs against each other and describe what it is that we can see completely shifts the energy. And according to the masters, this is the great opportunity collectively right now, but it begins in our most intimate spaces. It actually begins to relieve that pressure of compression so that our worlds can begin to open up again with new experiences. So that's the invitation for you on this day, to begin to reverse your view with your relationship. It's not putting your back to someone. It may feel as if you're putting your back to someone if they're still facing into the center. But if you can both agree to shift your view and shift your focus while staying in the center, an incredible opportunity becomes available. So I hope this is helpful for you at this incredible time of intensity. I hope that you'll take this invitation to play with creating a whole new sphere of reality. And I hope that it helps you to feel fortified and supported in a completely new way so that you can feel empowered again in your most intimate and closest relationship.